Hello everybody, welcome to this week's update video. I say this week, I have been away for a little while, suffering from a bit of burnout. There's been a lot of work that is needed to do on Inkscape, and of course I'm only one person, so I've been overscheduling my time, so I needed some rest as well as being able to just buckle down and get some work done without having to worry about making videos. But I apologize to my regular watchers. It's been probably 2 months. We got the 1.4.3 release of Inkscape out the way, but after that I was kind of done. So I'm back. You can thank Cheeseness from the maker of a great game, Hive Time, and a bunch of other games for prodding me to make another update video. Thanks, Cheese. You're a great mate. So let's talk about, first of all, some of the work that I've managed to actually get done, and then we're going to talk about the CMYK color managed rendering engine that we're building, and then we'll talk about some of the other things that are going on in Inkscape. Okay, so some work that I've been up to. I refactored the recent files code. My initial goal was to basically provide a way for users to see the auto-saved files. These are files that Inkscape makes periodically. It's the default, I believe, is 10 minutes, but they're quite invisible, and so I wanted to provide an interface so that you can access them. The design community that we have didn't agree with the way in which I wanted to present the files, so I scaled the feature back to just the back-end parts, the refactoring of the code itself that would basically make the data accessible and would start recording the data correctly, but how it should be presented to the user is not a settled question. And in fact, there isn't a designer available to work on this problem. So if you're a designer, especially a user experience person who wants to contribute to Inkscape and you want like a little project to work on, this might be your time. The code has the data available. It just needs a design to plug it into. The brief is basically Inkscape makes a bunch of saves periodically, and you want the user to be able to access those saves either because Inkscape crashed. We also create crash files as well, which are a separate category, but they do a similar thing. Or because they want to go back in time and see something from the past. Maybe they deleted objects and things and saved the file and then went, oops, no, actually, I needed that thing from the past. This is basically like a permanent fixed undo that's inside of your files for like a couple of undo steps every 10 minutes if you have it set to that. But you can have it doing every 10 seconds if you were crazy enough to like want lots of SVG files. So yeah, get in touch. Maybe this is your time. I fixed the Cappy PDF. This is the PDF exporter that can do CMYK. It had problems with the image caching that was basically, it was duplicating the same image if it was the first image that you had loaded into the cache. Basically the caching key was broken. And there was a bunch of other small refactorings and fixes that I did to that to improve the way we handle images in the PDF export for 1.5. That's looking good. I unitized the SVG length and units code. Basically, the way Inkscape has traditionally been constructed, it's this big monolithic program, and testing has always been basically demanding that users, i.e. you guys, test Inkscape to make sure we haven't broken it. But this is a really inefficient way to make sure that especially small, subtle things haven't broken in the meantime. An example of small, subtle things that can break are things like utilities. In this case, it's the way in which it's the reader and writer of numbers with units inside the SVG files, and the way those units are translated from, say, from centimeters to inches and pixels to so on. That was a part of the unified mess, which made it very difficult to test. Your tests basically have to link against the entire of the Inkscape binary. But I split them out so that we can have proper unit testing that just encompasses those elements. Refactored a few things like prefs and things. There are better ways that we could have done it, but basically this is an evolution of the code. This is where we want to move to in Inkscape, is being able to have code that is not just a better professional grade, but also that it is testable and tested, that we have tests written to cover the actual functionality. Also, I fixed a paste on page problem. You couldn't customize the keyboard keys for paste on page. This was thanks to a suggestion from one of my Patreons that got in touch with me and essentially suggested that this was something that needed to be fixed. If you would like to be one of my sponsors, these are you guys who pay me to work on Inkscape, and you want a bit of a way to point me at specific bugs that you think are important, join my LibrePay, join my Patreon. Then you can get in touch with me and point me at specific problems that are important to you. That's part of the deal. That my attention is limited, but I will pay more attention if you pay me, if that makes sense. I fixed some instructions on the zine template. That happened because somebody posted to social media how great the zine template was. I love getting credit, but I also love checking my work, and I noticed there was a problem, so I fixed it. This is where we can actually get into the rendering engine, the stuff that is taking a long time to do. I've realized that I'm doing a job which is essentially, you've heard of a 10x developer, right? So like the cynical view of that is basically one developer doing the work of 10 developers. That's what this feels like. This feels like a task that should have been an entire team of programmers. And I am hubristic enough to try and do it myself, right? To try and essentially realize that there isn't a lot of resources available for Inkscape to actually get work done. And we cannot sit on our hands and just say that things are impossible. We kind of just have to make a play of them, even if it takes years to do, which unfortunately this is taking more time. Just like everything I attempt with Inkscape, it takes more time because we just don't have the resources to hire people to do work that could get it done in a faster time. But we are making progress, which is great. The first thing is I refactored the color interpolations attributes. These are essentially inside the SVG file, inside the SVG specification. It says how objects should be interpolated, painted onto a raster. These interpolations instructions in the SVG spec are limited to just two options, sRGB and linear RGB. I was not happy with that. I decided that as well as supporting those two options, I am also supporting every other color space that we have. So if you want the interpolation to happen in CMYK, this allows that. If you want the interpolation to happen in HSL, although it might be a bit slow if you do, this will allow that. So that refactoring actually got committed. It's in the development version. It doesn't do very much right now because it is separable, right? It's its own little component, but it needed to be fixed so that we could support all of these other things. For the actual engine itself, I've worked on the structural elements. Basically, I've moved it over from editing the engine that we have right now to being its own directory with its own files. This allows it to be essentially built side by side. So I'm building an engine next to the engine we already have. This is providing me with a bit more stability because I can actually compile Inkscape and not have to struggle against all of the weird and wonderful ways that the engine was being abused or used by different parts of Inkscape. So developer comes along, they say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I just like plug this thing into this thing? And unfortunately that means that the old code has just a lot of extra functionality that does things, and those things have basically nothing to do with rendering SVG files, right? They're just kind of and the option is to, like, if I want to rip them out, and I definitely want to rip them out, I have to break all of that stuff. And I'm not ready to break all of that stuff yet. I don't have time to deal with it. So the copy allows me to do that. It also allows me to put unit tests around things in a very specific way and be much more deliberate about separations. I can actually go to the separations that I have by the commits that I'm keeping to. I refactored the color API, a lot of code required for surface transformations. This is basically a field of rasters that you're rendering to. You need to be able to translate it from CMYK to RGB, RGB to CMYK, and every other possible combination. I had to add an alpha color space to the color API as well. This allows the certain situations when you're rendering where you need access to just the alpha components, especially in filters, and you are essentially using that that as data to do things. So a color space that's just specific to that. It's not something that you would ever use inside of Inkscape user interface, but it needs to be there for the rendering engine. The whole image pixel access stuff, which I talked about in a previous video, which is the ability to access these surfaces as a bunch of pixels and all of the tools necessary to quickly access them, regardless of whether they're integers or floats or any other format, and operate them consistently. There's the surface management engine that basically encapsulates the Cairo surface stuff. The drawing operation tools that we have traditionally used. It manages it in terms of having multiple surfaces to be able to cope with drawing CMYK values without using the assumption that everything is in RGB. We break that assumption from Cairo with this extra code, but we also allow the ability to access the pixel access stuff as well as drawing contexts and stuff, and it's a lot cleaner and tested, which the old code is not. The build context itself, this is all of the stuff that allows you to paint paths and draw with strokes and alpha transparencies and all of the stuff that you will probably recognize as vector drawing. That's in the drawing context layer. That as well has a whole bunch of new tests. I can actually show you what those little tests look like with the test patching. I've actually enjoyed writing the tests that produce the little graphics and stuff because they're representative inside of ASCII. It's like making little ASCII arts of the actual code, the actual picture outputs, which is nice. Then there's the drawing filter stack. These are essentially all of the filters that you would recognize. They back onto the pixel access filters, but they also involve the context drawer because some of those operations can just be done with the context. A lot of that stuff, that's what I'm currently working on. I'm deep into, and mostly I'm getting tripped over at the fact that is the Gaussian blur filter is an absolute pig of a thing. When the values are too big on one of them, it's just blanking the entire canvas. That's a bit annoying. I'll get that fixed. At least I've identified what the issue is now, because I was pulling my hair out trying to figure out why my tests were just blank. But that process involves connecting up to some of the structures that we already have in place, not writing new code, but just trying to make sure that the pixel access and the other stuff fits into how we are now going to do things. This is mostly code that's copied, but then we strip mine a bunch of stuff out of it because we don't need it anymore. Then there's the drawing item refactoring. This is kind of like the last layer and the layer that should require the least amount of editing. This is plugging in all of the drawing operations that consume SVG directly and start laying out what the states, the graphic states, the various drawing operations should look like. Most of that shouldn't change, right? Because there is an extreme amount of legacy involved in how to draw SVG files correctly that I absolutely cannot afford to rewrite. So the goal has always been to make sure that this engine is backing into all of the existing code as best as we can. Some operations still need to be changed. All of that stuff that I mentioned about crufty code that was coming in from outside that's doing a whole bunch of other stuff, this is the layer where it's happening in, where we're just drawing widgets and other crazy stuff because it seemed convenient at the time. That stuff all gets removed. A lot of utilities that it's kind of Cairo utilities that it's using because it's directly interrogating Cairo surfaces, all of that needs to change. But the way in which the layers that I've talked about before have been designed are designed specifically to do that work, right, to replace that. So hopefully what we'll end up with is a much smaller footprint. There's a lot more extra code that I can't really talk about, that it's technical. It's about how color transformations happen, how slots happen, and when you decide when to do a translation or not. Basically, every time you have to turn something from an RGB to a CMYK, not only do you lose data, but you also you have to create a new surface of the right size, which takes memory, which is slow. You have to copy all those bytes over. This is happening on the CPU and the RAM. It's not happening in the GPU because we don't have shader versions of any of this engine stuff yet. That would be interesting. Actually, this a GPU version is something that is probably possible once this makes sense, right? Once this architecture is in place and it works, then you can start to think about how to represent these things on the GPU. So yeah, that's where we are. And by the time you get to being able to render those drawing items correctly, you've done the thing, right? You can render out a CMYK document because you already have all of the rendering components, and then it's just a matter of grinding away at a lot of the other issues, maybe doing some speed improvements because it's going to need to be fast enough to render live to the screen. If we can't make it fast enough, or it's taking too long to get it fast enough, then maybe we'll just commit the two engines together and have one slow rendering engine that can produce outputs for testing or for like visual confirmation and for rendering to a CMYK JPEG or something, and then a faster one which is incorrect, would be the one that we currently use. But we'll see how it goes. I have been very particular about trying to make the code as fast as possible, probably to the detriment of my own sanity, but that's okay because we need to figure out how to fix this problem regardless of how we get there. Let's talk about some of the work that's going on inside the rest of Inkscape. I want to give a shout out to Ian Das, who has fixed a whole bunch of crashes and a whole bunch of work. You're doing really nice work. Thank you. A shout out to Mykov, who is an absolute legend when it comes to the object property stuff, refactoring widgets. We worked together on making sure that the refactored widgets architecture inside of the code was good, and I think that's bearing fruit. There's new custom widgets which are much tidier and more specific, but there's also lots of other works that he's worked on. He's refactored the transform dialog, he's added a generic combo box for numbers, he's added a text combo box to replace a GTK3 one. He's added the polyline and polygon to the object properties. So he's a busy beaver, absolutely. And I think probably his work is the work that most people will see in the next version of Inkscape, especially I think with the objects dialog box, since that is the thing that people from Adobe Illustrator and Affinity will recognize as the ability to change colors and stuff. It's very much in their style. But as I've said before, we're not getting rid of the fill and stroke dialog, which is the Coral Draw style stuff. We will support them both, but they both have their own workflows. PBS has been bringing back icons in the menus, as well as lots of other merge request checking and doing checking the maths on merge requests and stuff, which is great. Very, very useful stuff. I think he's got a bunch of stuff in the works as well. Henrique, who is our main designer currently, did improvements to the snapping toolbar user interface, as well as releasing the new dash icon set, and working to fix a whole bunch of things with the dash icons and icon checking and stuff. I put in some extra scripts basically that check if you have uploaded all of the icons necessary, and that's an evolving process of making sure that that script is correct, as well as the icons are all there. You need to make sure that you have a complete icon theme, not just half of one. Charlotte has been working on the PDF stuff. She fixed a whole bunch of crashes in PDF opening. This is when you open a PDF file, graphic states, a whole bunch of stuff. And we've also had a bunch of contributions from, I would say, a wide variety of individuals who have been fixing various crashes and things. I think because they are hoping to join Google Summer of Code. The problem is that Inkscape might not do the Google Summer of Code this year because we don't have anybody to run it. We just don't have the people who could administer and mentor and do some stuff. We're kind of running thin on time from especially senior people who have gone quiet in the last year, and that makes things very, very difficult. I'm currently hiring for the Bug Accelerator program. We're in the organization steps of doing the announcements, so anything I tell you is not finalized, but the idea is to hire 2 engineers and 1 administrator for, I think we decided 20 hours a week, so it's part-time for 3 months. And I'm hoping to bring in new people through that process because we desperately need new people to work on Inkscape who have time, because we're paying them, hopefully, to fix bugs and crashes and work on, especially 1.5. This is specific to 1.5, but by the way, to make sure that 1.5 is actually good enough to release, at least in an alpha or a beta state, so that we're getting users involved in the testing and we're getting feedback. That lack of feedback really hurts our ability to continue. So yeah, that's part of my administrative work. I'll also be doing that. There's also some website work and some other stuff. You can see why I get burned out, right? Like doing a whole bunch of admin and also programming and also community management. It's probably too much. So thank you all for watching this update video. What I will do is I won't promise to do a video every week, but when I have something substantive to say or some feature that needs to have a shout out, I'll try and make a video then, okay? And please do let me know your ideas and your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you next time.